Welcome to the Indian Newslink podcast series Coffee with Kamil by Kamil Lakshman.
I've been thinking about this word intention. It seems to be the root cause of a lot of problems, creates mischief. Let's dissect this. So if somebody is making a statement about why you did something and what was your intention in doing it, and it doesn't gel with what your intention in fact was. In fact, you really didn't even have an intention as such. You just did it. And you didn't really think about why you did it. It was just a reaction to something. Then when somebody voices your intention as a fact, and it doesn't sound right to you that was your intention, and then you start thinking about what in fact was your intention, it feels wrong. It feels wrong that they had voiced that particular intention of why you did what you did or thought what you thought. It feels or felt as if you're being attacked. There's some kind of injustice that's been done, some kind of wrongdoing that's been done to you because that's not your intention. And so how do you deal with it? Because it upsets you. Potentially it has the ability to upset you. And if you are upset, then it's going to fester away in your mind. You could digest it and put it to rest, but it never goes away. It's stored there somewhere. And then if the same person comes up with another intention for something else you have done or are doing or thinking about which you've voiced, and then they come up with they take off your intention, then can you imagine what's happening? There's another, again, your reaction could be to further store, not do anything. But you will start feeling a certain element of dislike towards this person because they are assuming what your intention is. And that assumption is not correct because it's a presumption of intention. So it can cause a lot of bad blood. It can cause a lot of conflict. It can cause a lot of mischief. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal when somebody has decided that you've done this because of this, that, or the other? It's a difficult one because if you feel a great sense of injustice because you feel they've wronged you, and in turn it's a blemish on your character, for example, or it somehow dents your reputation, then it's very difficult one to swallow. So I've been thinking of potential problems, potential solutions to this problem. And one could be that you could, when that first one happens, because you want to avoid a story in your head starting about this particular person who's wronged you. Because the conclusion could be that that person is jealous of you, or that person doesn't like you, or that person it feels lack in their own life, so they need to put you down. Especially if the intention is wrongdoing. And if that was the case, then you can just imagine how it starts becoming a cycle. You've started a cycle. They've started a cycle. You've responded, and the both of you now are part of a cycle. And are you going to ever break out of that cycle? Probably not. Probably it's going to end in bad blood. And if you were friends, you will no longer be friends. that relationship will be severed because you'll have a fight, and the genesis of that fight will be this, whatever that was said at some point in time in your life. So my inclination is probably to deal with it when it happens, to be upfront and say, no, that's not my intention. And in fact, I really have not thought about why I did it, but now that you've said it, and I've had a thought about it, it is not that, it is this. However, sometimes people will view that as very confrontational and therefore very unpleasant, and that in itself could create a problem and in that particular relationship. Or you could just live with that story, but acknowledge that it's a story, acknowledge that you felt bad blood and that injustice was done to you. Maybe another way of dealing with it is not to be confrontational, but to bring that topic up in a friendly conversation and deal with it. But solution is subjective. It's each to their own, how they deal with it. But I think the more important thing is to understand how when you voice somebody else's intention, you have no idea what that person's intention is. So who gives you the right to voice that intention? How do you know? Have you checked with them? Have you asked them? Where are you getting your source of information from? You are not the source. The source is the person who's doing the action. They're the only one that know why they're doing it, whether consciously or subconsciously. And so this is one way of looking at intention. The one I find really interesting is where what now is coined as fake news. And that's really interesting also, because that is where a pool of people, a population, are led to think in a particular way, which could be problematic, hugely problematic, especially if voting is done according to that. A person is dealt in a particular manner because of that. So, for example, when we have the situation of a fake story comes out about somebody. I see this in Bollywood and Hollywood. Not so much in Hollywood, but more so in Bollywood. I see that stories come up and the source, and in royalty too, you'll find that a royal insider said this, or in Bollywood it could be a very generic way of referring to it, but nevertheless, the intention of what that person is doing comes across in the story. And it is really, really interesting then to listen to people that are following, for example, Facebook, who will tell it to a third party as gospel truth. That person did this. That person is like this. That person is terrible. The reputation is completely tarnished. And this poor innocent person sitting somewhere in Timbuktu has no idea that about what's going on, other than if they looked at Facebook and saw all the gossip columns. But they are being discredited by someone far across the sea about them. And just when you hear that, you see that. And often I've been in conversation with older people who have come up with, did you know this has happened and did you know that has happened, who have been following Facebook. And I always say to them, well, how do you know? How do you know whether that's a fact? Have you spoken to the person? And they look at me with very appalled that I would say such a thing. How dare I not agree with the source on Facebook? Well, I think we are living in a very dangerous world. And this take on intention of somebody else is something that we need to pay more attention to. And before we judge, we should possibly think again. Do we really know? Are we being fair? Are we being just in characterization of somebody? Especially if it's going to ruin their reputation, it's going to put a mark on their character. We should think again. Because if we don't, then that story will become a reality for a lot more people other than the person whose intention it was.
Thank you for listening to the Indian Newslink podcast series Coffee with Kamil by Kamil Lakshman.